There is a detail buried deep inside the reporting on the Strait of Hormuz crisis that almost nobody is talking about loudly enough, and when you fully understand what it means, you realize that the problem in that waterway is not just political, not just military, not just economic. It is physical, and it may be the single most underreported reason why the strait cannot reopen, even if both sides wanted it to tomorrow. Here's what happened. According to reporting by the New York Times, citing U.S. officials, Iran lost track of the mines it planted in the Strait of Hormuz and is therefore unable to fully reopen the waterway even on its own terms. Read that slowly. Iran cannot open the strait. Not because of American pressure, not because of negotiations, not because of the ceasefire status, but because Iran planted mines in the world's most critical energy corridor using small decentralized boats, without a clear command chain, without systematic documentation of where each mine was placed, and in some cases without any record at all of the exact locations. U.S. officials told the New York Times that Iran mined the strait haphazardly, and that in some cases the mines were deployed in ways that caused them to drift away from their original positions due to sea currents. So not only does Iran not know where it put them, but some of the mines have moved since they were placed, meaning the danger zone is larger than even the incomplete Iranian records would suggest. The implications of this are staggering, because every conversation about reopening Hormuz, every peace negotiation, every ceasefire condition, every American ultimatum, every Pakistani mediation effort, has been premised on the assumption that the strait can be reopened when both sides agree to reopen it. But that assumption may be wrong, because a waterway seeded with untracked mines cannot be safely reopened by diplomacy alone. It requires physical clearance operations, and physical clearance operations require time, equipment, expertise, and conditions that do not currently exist in the Strait of Hormuz. Welcome to Dr-NoraLen. Today is May 13th, 2026. Subscribe right now and hit notifications because this story has 4 parts, and each one is more alarming than the last. Part 2 covers what mine clearance actually involves and why even the world's most powerful navies are struggling with the scale of this problem. Part 3 covers the UK's extraordinary military deployment announced today, and what it tells us about how long the world thinks this crisis will last. And Part 4 covers the environmental catastrophe unfolding off Kharg Island that the UN is now calling a potential disaster. Stay with us through all 4 parts, because the full picture of what is happening in that strait right now is not being told anywhere with the depth it deserves. Before we can understand why the mine problem in Hormuz is so difficult to solve, we need to understand what naval mine clearance actually involves. Because most people hear the phrase mine hunting and imagine something like a metal detector on a beach. But the reality of clearing naval mines from a turbulent, high-traffic international waterway under active military threat is one of the most dangerous and technically demanding operations in modern naval warfare. According to reporting that cited military analysts, see mine clearance as one of the most complex military operations in existence. And the New York Times pointed directly to a paradox that needs to be understood clearly. Even superpowers like the United States, which are state-of-the-art mine hunting vessels, do not have a surplus of such resources to manage the clearance of a huge and turbulent waterway like the Strait of Hormuz in record time. And if that is the case for the most technologically powerful military on Earth, the Iranian situation is even more critical. Here is the specific problem Iran faces. It used small boats to lay the mines in the early weeks of the conflict. Those small boats operated with a decentralized command structure, meaning different units were laying mines in different locations without reporting their exact placements to a central command. There was no master chart being maintained, no GPS coordinates being logged, no unified record of where each mine went into the water. And then some of those mines drifted due to tidal and current patterns in the strait, meaning even the incomplete records that do exist no longer accurately reflect where the mines actually are right now. U.S. officials told the New York Times that the United States is not certain how many mines Iran placed in the strait or exactly where they are located, in part because the small craft used were difficult to track, even with American surveillance capabilities running continuously across that area. The U.S. did conduct mine clearance operations in the strait beginning April 11th, with Navy destroyers transiting as part of mine countermeasure readiness. And Trump announced that American forces had started clearing the strait. But the scale of the problem vastly exceeds what a handful of destroyers can resolve quickly. Because the strait is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point and 90 miles long, and even a relatively small number of randomly distributed uncharted mines spread across that geography creates a danger corridor that requires systematic sensor-by-sensor sweeping before any commercial vessel can safely transit with full confidence. Iran also, despite losing significant naval capacity in the conflict, still retains hundreds of small boats capable of laying additional mines or conducting harassment operations. And destroying all of those small craft has been proven impossible, meaning the threat of new mines being added is not gone. It is ongoing. Now consider what this means for the shipping companies that are watching all of this from the outside. Because right now there are captains, fleet operators, and insurance underwriters in Singapore, Rotterdam, Tokyo, and Dubai making real-time decisions about whether to move their vessels. And the answer they keep arriving at is the same one they have been arriving at for weeks. Not yet, because no responsible maritime operator is going to send a vessel worth hundreds of millions of dollars and a crew of 20 or 30 people through a waterway where the number of mines is unknown, the locations are uncharted, and the entity that placed them has publicly admitted it cannot find them all. Lloyd's of London and major war risk insurers have either suspended coverage for Hormuz transits entirely or priced it so high that it makes the economics of the voyage unworkable for most operators. Before the war, a standard war risk premium for a Gulf transit was a fraction of a percent of the vessel's value. The premiums being quoted now, where coverage can even be obtained, are multiples of what they were before February 28th. And insurance markets do not move on political statements. They move on risk assessments. And every risk assessment for the Strait of Hormuz right now reflects a waterway that has untracked mines, active drone threats, an ongoing dual blockade, and zero mine clearance infrastructure currently operating at scale inside the strait itself. This is why Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi said the strait would reopen with, quote, due consideration of technical limitations. And why U.S. officials interpreted that phrase as a direct reference to Iran's inability to quickly locate and clear the mines it deployed. Rather than a diplomatic softening of Iran's position, it was a factual admission of a physical problem that neither side has the tools to resolve immediately. The diplomats can agree on paper. The mines do not care about the paper. The clearest signal that the world understands the mine problem is not a short-term issue came from Britain on May 12th and May 13th, when the UK government made a series of announcements that amount to the most significant British military commitment to the region in the modern era, and that collectively paint a picture of a conflict whose consequences the international community has concluded will not be resolved by a peace deal alone. On May 12th, UK Defence Secretary John Healey co-chaired a virtual summit of defence ministers from over 40 countries to advance military plans to protect shipping and restore trade flow in the Strait of Hormuz. Britain and France are jointly leading what is now being formally called the multinational military mission to secure the strait, and the scale of the coalition supporting it is extraordinary, with some reports placing total participating nations at 51 states. The UK's specific contribution, announced on May 13th and backed by £115 million in new dedicated funding, includes advanced autonomous mine-hunting equipment capable of detecting and defeating mines, the Royal Navy's modular beehive system which delivers high-speed autonomous Kraken drone boats that can sense, track and identify underwater threats, HMS Dragon, a Type 45 air defense destroyer already en route to the Middle East equipped with the advanced Sea Viper air defense system, Typhoon fast jets that will conduct air patrols over the strait, and specialist mine clearance personnel who have been preparing in the UK specifically for upcoming operations in the strait. The RFA Lime Bay is also being upgraded in Gibraltar to serve as a mothership for autonomous mine hunting systems if required, meaning Britain is simultaneously sending the asset to hunt mines and the platform to support that asset. British defence officials were explicit about the reason for the mine-specific focus, acknowledging that escort warships alone will not be sufficient to fully secure maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, particularly due to the continued risk posed by naval mines. That is a British government official confirming publicly that the mine problem in Hormuz is significant enough that it requires dedicated autonomous technology and specialist personnel who had to be specifically trained and prepared in the United Kingdom before deployment. Now let us talk about what autonomous mine hunting actually looks like in practice, because the technology Britain is deploying is genuinely cutting edge, and the fact that it is needed here tells you something important about the environment inside that strait right now. The Kraken drone boats that form part of the Royal Navy's beehive system are high-speed autonomous surface vessels that carry sonar arrays capable of scanning the seabed and water column for mine-like objects. They do not require a crew on board. which matters enormously in a strait where Iranian fast attack boats and drones are still active threats. A crude minesweeper in those waters would itself be a target. An autonomous drone boat can be sent into the most dangerous corridors without risking additional lives and without triggering the escalation that a crewed military vessel entering contested waters might generate. The uncrewed underwater vehicles that OFA Lime Bay will carry as its mothership role perform a complementary function, diving beneath the surface to physically inspect and, if necessary, neutralize objects identified by the surface drones. The combination of surface sonar sweep followed by underwater inspection and neutralization is the modern version of what minesweepers did manually in previous decades. But the scale of Hormuz, the depth variation, the current patterns, the traffic density even at reduced levels, and the active threat environment mean that even with autonomous systems, this operation will take months, not weeks. The mission is described as strictly defensive in nature and is designed to restore confidence for commercial shipping, but it will become operational only when conditions allow. That phrase is doing significant work, because it means the 40-plus nations involved are not planning to operate while active hostilities continue. They are pre-positioning capability for the moment after a deal is reached. And that pre-positioning is happening right now, because the mine clearance alone, before any commercial shipping can safely resume at scale, is expected to take significant time even with the best autonomous technology available. Defense Secretary Healy said, "We are turning diplomatic agreement into practical military plans to restore confidence for shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, and with our allies this multinational mission will be defensive, independent, and credible." The fact that 40 nations felt the need to coordinate a joint military mission to physically clear a waterway tells you everything about the depth of the problem that those lost mines have created. While the world's navies are preparing to hunt mines in the Strait of Hormuz, a second environmental catastrophe is developing in the same waters. And it is moving in real time toward the coastlines of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, whether or not anyone stops fighting long enough to address it. Maritime intelligence firm Windward AI confirmed to Fox News Digital on May 10th that a second suspected oil slick had been detected near Iran's Kharg Island export hub, covering an approximate visible area of between 12 and 20 square kilometers. This second slick compounds a larger spill that was first identified on May 8th, which satellite imagery showed flowing southward and fragmenting as it moved through Gulf waters. The United Nations warned that oil spills in the region could trigger an environmental catastrophe amid the ongoing Strait of Hormuz crisis. And the trajectory modeling from Windward makes that concern concrete. The larger spill from May 8th is projected to pass through Qatar's exclusive economic zone within approximately 4 days, with possible landfall near Al Marfa in the United Arab Emirates in roughly 13 days. Kharg Island is the source of roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports, handling 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day under normal operations. It sits in waters where the U.S. conducted strikes on March 13th, targeting over 90 Iranian military sites while deliberately avoiding the oil and gas infrastructure. The strikes avoided the infrastructure, but the combination of damaged port facilities, aging pipeline systems, congested anchorage zones where dark tankers have been holding position for weeks, and the complete absence of any environmental response capacity in an active war zone has created the conditions for exactly the kind of slow-motion disaster that the UN is now warning about. Windward's maritime AI platform identified 21 commercial dark tankers operating without AIS transmission across 3 protected Iranian water anchorage zones. On May 10, 12 of those vessels were VLCC-class hulls, representing a combined loadable capacity of approximately 24 million barrels. Those vessels have been sitting anchored in Iranian waters since the last confirmed tanker departure from Kharg Island on May 7th, meaning 24 million barrels worth of tanker capacity is anchored near a leaking oil terminal in an active conflict zone, with no clear timeline for movement and no environmental response infrastructure operating anywhere in the vicinity. Now step back and think about what this geography looks like from above. You have a closed waterway seeded with uncharted mines. You have 1,500 commercial vessels holding position across the Persian Gulf, many of them tankers sitting fully or partially loaded. You have a major oil spill spreading southward from Kharg Island toward the coastlines of 3 of the wealthiest and most ecologically sensitive nations in the region. And you have 0 functional environmental response operations underway anywhere in that zone, because the organizations and governments that would normally coordinate a spill response are focused entirely on the military and diplomatic dimensions of the crisis. Nobody is skimming oil. Nobody is deploying containment booms. Nobody is running the kind of aerial surveillance that a spill response requires. Because this is a war zone and environmental response infrastructure does not operate in war zones. The Gulf is one of the world's most ecologically fragile bodies of water. Its shallow depth, high salinity, extreme temperatures, and limited water exchange with the broader ocean mean that a major oil contamination event does not disperse the way it would in an open ocean environment. It accumulates. It settles into seabed sediment. It coats mangrove systems. It enters the food chain of the coral ecosystems, the fisheries and the desalination intake infrastructure that Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain and Kuwait depend on for a significant proportion of their freshwater supply. The Gulf Cooperation Council states collectively operate some of the largest seawater desalination facilities on Earth. Several of those facilities have intake points that draw from Gulf waters. An oil contamination event at the scale of what Windward is now tracking in real time near Kharg Island is not just an ecological problem. It is a potential freshwater security crisis for tens of millions of people. The environmental layer of this crisis has received almost no coverage relative to its severity. And that absence of coverage does not reflect an absence of danger. It reflects the fact that war coverage and environmental coverage operate in different media lanes, and the connection between them is not being made clearly enough for the public to understand the full dimension of what is at stake in those waters. Here is the complete picture as of May 13, 2026. The Strait has untracked mines drifting in its shipping lanes. A 40-nation coalition is preparing mine-hunting drones and specialist personnel because the mines cannot be cleared quickly by conventional means. Commercial transits are running at roughly 10% of baseline, with only 6 ships moving today against a pre-war average of 120 per day. The oil spill from Kharg Island is drifting toward Qatar and the UAE, with landfall projected in 13 days. The UN has issued an environmental catastrophe warning, and the peace negotiations that could theoretically begin addressing all of this collapsed over a weekend, and are now described by the President of the United States as running on a 1% chance of survival. Subscribe to Dr-NoraLen right now and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow this story will have moved again. We will cover every development in the mine crisis, the multinational mission, the Kharg oil spill, and the negotiations the moment they break. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because the question that matters most right now is this. If both sides signed a deal tomorrow, how long would it actually take before a single commercial tanker could safely cross the Strait of Hormuz? And the answer to that question is one that nobody in power is giving the public an honest answer on.